Infold just released New World Underneath Stories, and after reading through them, I need to talk about Fairy Tale immediately, because this chapter isn't just lore, it's a full explanation of how the world of love and deep space actually works. It reveals that emotion isn't something that comes from living, it's what reality itself is built on. The first thread presents itself as a gentle fairy tale about a child and his mother in a quiet, dreamlike world. However, beneath its soft imagery lies one of the most important foundational explanations of the love and deep space universe. This story is not simply about dream weaving, it is about the origin of reality itself, the role of emotion in creation, and the existence of a system designed to control what was once free. The story introduces the Dreamweaving Bureau, a place described as existing deep beneath the ocean, closer to the heart of the planet than even the deepest seabed. This location is significant. It is not positioned as part of the ordinary world, but as something foundational, almost like the hidden core of existence. Here, dreamweavers gather, wandering fragile emotional ripples drifting through the universe, and transform them into structured forms, dreams, visions, and experiences that bring peace and order. This process establishes a crucial truth. In this world, emotion exists first, and reality is something that is constructed from it. Emotions are not byproducts of life, they are the raw material from which life, meaning, and perception are formed. The dream weavers themselves act as intermediaries between chaos and order. Their role is not to create emotions, but to capture, organize, and refine them. Left alone, these emotional ripples are unstable and formless. Through weaving, they are turned into something coherent. This suggests that reality, as experienced by individuals, is not natural or spontaneous, but rather processed and structured by an unseen system. In this way, the Dreamweaving Bureau represents control, an invisible mechanism that shapes how existence is experienced. This idea becomes more complex through the perspective of the baby dreamweaver, who serves as the emotional and philosophical center of the story. Unlike his mother, who calmly fulfills her role, the child resists. He watches her work but feels no joy in it. Eventually, he voices what he has been holding inside. He does not want to weave anymore. He questions why they must sit and perform this task instead of swimming freely like other creatures in the sea. This moment is critical because it introduces a conflict between freedom and structure. The act of weaving represents order, responsibility, and participation in the system, while swimming represents instinct, natural existence, and freedom from control. The mother's response is gentle but revealing. She does not deny his feelings or force him to continue. Instead, she tells him that he may rest and reassures him that one day, when he finds the most beautiful threads, he will come to love weaving. This suggests that participation in the system is not purely forced, but rather something these beings are expected to grow into, an acceptance of order as necessary. However, the child's resistance remains significant. It implies that the system itself may not be entirely natural, and that there is an inherent tension between what these beings are meant to do and what they truly desire. This tension is further deepened by the story's description of the world before weaving existed. The mother tells of a time before life was created, when the ocean and deep space were one, and the world existed as a silent dream. This line is one of the most important in the entire narrative. It suggests that there was once a state of unity where emotion, represented by the ocean, and thought or existence, represented by deep space, were not separate. There was no distinction between feeling and reality. Everything existed in a singular, undivided state. The introduction of the first thread marks the beginning of separation. The ancestor discovers a strand described as neither water, light, nor sound, but something made of countless tiny shimmering motes that carry feelings such as joy and longing. This thread represents the first moment when emotion became something that could be isolated, touched, and manipulated. When the ancestor interacts with it, those feelings are no longer chaotic. They become guided, organized, and transformed into visions. This is the birth of weaving, and by extension, the birth of structured reality. However, the origin of the first thread remains unknown. The mother offers several possibilities. It could have come from the combined feelings of life, from a single organism, or from a whisper of deep space itself. The uncertainty is intentional. It shows that even the system, responsible for shaping reality, does not fully understand where it began. This lack of origin introduces the idea that there may be something beyond the system, something that created emotion itself, or something that still exists outside of control. Anyway, by the end of the story, the baby Dreamweaver becomes quiet, his fins flush red, a detail that carries symbolic weight. Throughout the broader narrative, red is associated with real, intense emotion, something authentic and unfiltered. His reaction suggests that despite his resistance, he's beginning to feel the pull of the threads. He may not yet accept the system, but he is no longer untouched by it. This moment represents the beginning of transformation, the point where instinct, emotion, and structure begin to intersect. Taken as a whole, the first thread reveals that the world of love in deep space is built on a fundamental conflict. On one side is raw emotion, free and unstructured, represented by the ocean and the child's desire to swim. On the other side is controlled reality, shaped and maintained through the act of weaving. The dream weavers exist between these forces, turning chaos into order while also limiting the freedom of what once was. This framework connects directly to the larger patterns seen throughout the story. Characters like Raphael embody the tension between these two states, beings tied to emotion and instinct who struggle within a world that demands control and structure. Meanwhile, the recurring emphasis on memory, sensation, and connection suggests that emotion continues to resist full containment. It leaks through, influences behavior, and reshapes the system from within. I have talked about this in my other Raphael Explained videos. Go check them out. Ultimately, the first thread is not just a myth about creation. It is a statement about the nature of existence in this world, that reality is not simply lived, but constructed from emotion, and that this construction comes at a cost. Freedom is traded for stability, instinct for order, and authenticity for control. Yet, as the child's resistance shows, that original state, the desire to simply exist and feel without constraint, has not disappeared. It remains beneath the surface, waiting. So, we learned in the first thread, before anything existed, the world was silent and dreamlike, with no clear form or structure. Then, a being discovers the first thread, which carries emotions such as joy and longing. When this thread is touched and woven, those emotions become something visible and real. This shows that in this world, emotion comes first, and everything else, dreams, visions, and even reality, comes from it. The dream weavers do not create emotions, but they collect and organize them, turning something chaotic into something structured. This is important because it suggests that reality is not natural, but something that has been shaped and controlled. The story continues in Colors of the Cambrian Period, where we see what happens after the first thread is created. The world suddenly becomes full of life, color, and endless new forms. This moment reflects the idea of the Cambrian explosion, but instead of just biological growth, it represents emotional growth. For those who don't know what the Cambrian period is, it was a time in Earth's history that lasted from about 541 million to 485 million years ago, and it is best known for a major evolutionary event called the Cambrian explosion. During this period, life on Earth changed dramatically. Before the Cambrian, most living organisms were small, simple, and soft-bodied, but during the Cambrian, a wide variety of more complex life forms suddenly appeared, especially in the oceans. Now back to the story. Every color introduced in this section is tied to a specific feeling: green for life, blue for fading, red for hunger and instinct, white for fear, and black for conflict. This shows that color is not just something we see, but something we feel. It confirms that the world is built on emotional codes where feelings shape what exists. As more and more emotional threads appear, the world becomes too complex. The ocean, which once represented a calm and unified source of emotion, turns into a boiling dye house full of tangled threads. This imagery shows that emotions are no longer simple or easy to manage. They are overwhelming, constantly mixing, and creating new outcomes. Because of this, the dream weavers themselves must evolve. They develop more advanced ways to handle the threads, becoming witnesses rather than creators. This suggests that they are part of a system that organizes reality rather than controlling its origin. This is where the idea of the fractal library comes in. If emotions are turned into threads and those threads are woven into experiences, then there must be a place where these experiences are stored and managed. The fractal library can be understood as that system, a structure that holds countless variations of emotional realities. The term fractal means repetition and variation, meaning that the same emotions can be reused and reshaped into different outcomes. This explains why the world may feel like it is repeating itself or why connections seem familiar across different moments. Reality is not happening once. It is being rebuilt again and again from emotional patterns. However, not everything in this system is controlled. At the end of Colors of the Cambrian period, a soft yellow thread appears naturally and wraps around the baby dream weaver. This moment is different from the others because it is not forced or processed. It simply happens. The baby laughs, and for the first time, he begins to enjoy weaving. This suggests that not all emotions need to be controlled. Some are meant to be experienced naturally. This detail is important because it hints that certain connections exist outside of the system. When we connect this to the rest of the story, especially to Raphael, everything becomes clearer. Raphael is tied to the ocean, which represents raw emotion. He struggles with control because his emotions are too strong to be fully contained by the system. His art, which depends on real feeling, reflects this same idea. He cannot create unless something genuine exists. Meanwhile, MC represents something even more important, a connection that is not artificially created but naturally formed. This would explain why she affects him so deeply and why she seems to exist outside the normal rules of the system. In conclusion, the first thread and Colors of the Cambrian period explain that the world of love and deep space is built from emotion, not just matter. As those emotions grew more complex, a system was created to organize and control them, turning them into structured reality. This system can be understood as the fractal library, where emotional experiences are stored and repeated. However, the stories also suggest that not everything can be controlled. Some connections, especially real, genuine ones, exist beyond the system, reminding us that even in a constructed reality, something natural and true can still break through. In A Long Night, the story reveals what happens when the system that builds reality from emotion begins to collapse. At first, the baby dreamweaver notices that the soft, beautiful threads they once used to understand the world are no longer visible. This signals a major shift. Something has changed within the system itself. The mother then explains that a long night descended across the entire planet, bringing a wave of suffering so intense that it disrupted the very foundation of existence. Emotions, which once gave meaning and structure to reality, became overwhelming and chaotic, turning into tangled, damaged threads. Instead of dreams filled with feeling, there was only suffocation, showing that the system could no longer process emotions correctly. As the collapse worsens, invisible forces begin to destroy the foundation of the world, and entire species disappear, described as no longer dreaming. This suggests that existence in this world depends on emotional connection, and without it, life itself cannot continue. The Dreamweavers attempt to respond by continuing their work, but now their role has changed. Instead of weaving beautiful dreams, they are forced to create nightmares to contain the overwhelming despair. This reveals that nightmares are not random, but a way to manage emotional overload within the system. Despite their efforts, the damage spreads too quickly. Even the Dreamweavers themselves are affected, shown through the scars on the mother's body. While they have the ability to heal individual wounds, they cannot repair the suffering of an entire world. Eventually, they are forced to stop, entering a deep sleep for millions of years. This represents a complete system shutdown, where reality itself pauses because it can no longer function. At the end of the story, the Dreamweaver begins weaving again, and a new reality forms, with the sea and land taking shape once more. This confirms that the world is not permanent, but something that can be rebuilt. When connected to the idea of the fractal library, this suggests that reality operates in cycles. Emotions are gathered, woven into existence, become too complex or unstable, collapse, and are then reconstructed again. A Long Night reveals that the system is not perfect or controlled, but something that can break, adapt, and restart, showing that the world itself is part of an ongoing loop of creation, destruction, and renewal. In Cosmic Tides, the story reveals how reality continues after destruction and why it never returns to its original state. After the collapse described in A Long Night, the dream weavers begin creating again, showing that the system of weaving emotions into reality restarts rather than ends. However, this new creation is different. Emotions are no longer distant or abstract. They are directly felt, experienced, and understood as sensations. This shift reflects how reality itself becomes more complex with each cycle. As life begins to grow again, the story introduces the idea that even the smallest forms of life contain entire worlds within them, suggesting that reality is layered and structured like a fractal, with smaller systems existing inside larger ones. This idea expands further with the introduction of larger life forms like dinosaurs, whose rise and extinction show that entire eras of existence are part of repeating cycles of creation and destruction. These cycles are described as being like the breath of the universe, constant, natural, and unavoidable. The most important shift occurs with the arrival of humanity. Unlike earlier life forms, humans are capable of thinking beyond the present moment. They remember the past, imagine the future, and create emotions that are far more complex than simple survival instincts. Love, for example, evolves into something deeper, involving sacrifice, devotion, and even the willingness to face danger for another person. However, this complexity comes with consequences. As emotions grow stronger, they also become unstable. The story shows that curiosity can turn into greed and love can develop into possession, introducing imbalance into the system. This imbalance leads to the creation of something new and dangerous, a void or black hole, representing a point where the system can no longer process the emotional intensity it has created. The final imagery, where gentle colors turn into harsh red and blood begins to appear, reinforces the idea that the same emotions that create beauty can also cause destruction. Ultimately, Cosmic Tides reveals that reality is not just built from emotion, but constantly reshaped by it, and that as emotions evolve, they push the system toward both creation and collapse. In Nightmare, the story reveals the final state of the world and explains how the system that once created reality from emotion has become corrupted. At the beginning, the mother tells the child that the threads they once used are no longer soft and beautiful, but have turned into thorns. This change shows that emotions, which once created meaning in life, have become painful and destructive. The fact that the mother cannot remember when this transformation happened suggests that the system did not break suddenly, but slowly became unstable over time. The story then places humanity into this timeline, describing it as only existing in the last few seconds of the world's history. This suggests that humans are a recent and possibly destabilizing part of the system. When the child asks if the threads can return to what they once were, the mother admits that she does not know, showing that the system may no longer be able to recover. Unlike previous collapses, which were dramatic and destructive, the next one is described as something quiet and gradual, where the world slowly fades rather than breaks apart all at once. The deeper cause of this collapse is revealed when the mother explains that it happens when people turn a blind eye to beauty. This suggests that the problem is not just emotional overload, but emotional disconnection. When people stop recognizing meaning, emotion loses its purpose and the system begins to fail. The dream weavers themselves are shown to be powerless to stop this, describing themselves only as artists who record and reflect civilization rather than control it. The story also reveals that humanity has tried to escape natural limits, seeking eternal life and pushing the system beyond what it was meant to handle. This interference contributes to the instability, leading to a future where the world may eventually break apart completely, scattering into deep space. By the end, the unfinished tapestry represents reality itself, complex, chaotic, and impossible to fully untangle. The mother's final apology shows that this current age is not a perfect or balanced one, but a damaged version of the system, where creation and emotion still exist, but in a distorted and painful form. In A Bedtime Story for Good Kids, the story reaches its final conclusion by answering the most important question: why the dream weavers continue their work even when it brings pain. After learning that the threads of emotion have become corrupted and that reality itself is unstable, The child wonders why they do not simply stop weaving. The answer reveals that dream weaving is not a choice, but something essential to existence itself. It is compared to breathing, showing that the dream weavers cannot stop, just as life cannot stop existing, even when it is difficult or painful. The explanation goes further by showing that beauty and suffering are connected. Without experiencing pain or ugliness, it would be impossible to understand beauty. This means that the system requires both positive and negative emotions to give life meaning. Even as the world becomes more unstable and filled with suffering, the dream weavers continue their work, not because they believe they can save the world, but because they understand that everything is temporary. Death is inevitable, and all life will eventually disappear. A fairy tale story is not simply a bedtime story about creation. It is a direct reflection of Raphael's existence and his relationship with MC. Across the first thread, A Long Night, Cosmic Tides, Nightmare, and A Bedtime Story for Good Kids, the narrative explains a world built from emotion, shaped by cycles, and slowly corrupted over time. When this framework is applied to Raphael, it becomes clear that he is not just a character within this world, but a living embodiment of its rules. More importantly, MC represents the one element within this system that has not been fully corrupted, making their connection central to understanding both the story and the world itself. At the beginning of the Dreamweaver story, emotions are described as soft threads, something beautiful, meaningful, and capable of being woven into reality. These threads are not just symbolic, they are the foundation of existence. The Dreamweavers gather them, shape them, and turn them into dreams, which in turn form the structure of the world. However, as time passes, these threads become tangled, corrupted, and eventually transform into thorns. What was once a source of beauty becomes a source of pain. This transformation reflects the central conflict of the system. Emotion, while necessary for meaning, also has the potential to destabilize everything. Raphael exists within this exact contradiction. Like the Dreamweavers, he experiences emotion not as something distant or abstract, but as something physical and unavoidable. His feelings manifest through sensation, instability, and even pain, especially during moments like Ebb Day, where his control weakens and his true nature surfaces. This aligns with the story's idea that those who are most sensitive to emotion suffer the most when the system becomes unstable. For Raphael, love is not simple or safe. It is intense, overwhelming, and often painful. In this sense, he does not just understand the transformation of threads into thorns, he lives it. Despite this, Raphael does not stop weaving. Just as the Dreamweavers continue their work even after the system becomes corrupted, Raphael continues to seek connection, create meaning, and engage with emotion, even though he knows it can hurt him. The Dreamweaver story makes it clear that this is not a choice, but a fundamental part of existence. They continue weaving not because they believe they can fix the world, but because it is the only way to preserve meaning before everything fades. Similarly, Raphael does not pursue connection because it is safe or logical, but because he cannot exist without it. His actions, whether through art, memory, or shared experiences, reflect a need to hold on to something real, even if it is temporary. This is where MC becomes essential. In a system where most threads have become corrupted, she represents something different. Throughout the story, there are moments where threads appear naturally, untouched, and genuine. These moments suggest that not all connections are processed or controlled by the system. MC aligns with this idea. She is not something Raphael constructs or manipulates, and she is something he experiences. And her presence brings clarity where there is confusion, and stability where there is chaos. And this is why Raphael reacts to her so strongly. She represents what the threads used to be before they became thorns. Because of this, Raphael's attachment to MC goes beyond simple affection. It mirrors the function of the Dreamweavers themselves. Just as they preserve the meaning of existence through weaving, Raphael preserves his connection to MC through memory, art, and experience. He recreates moments, captures emotions, and holds on to details that might otherwise fade. This is not just romantic behavior, it is a response to a world where everything is temporary. In the Dreamweaver story, it is stated that even if life disappears, the songs and creations left behind ensure that existence was not in vain. Raphael operates under the same principle. He does not try to stop loss, but to make sure that what is lost still matters. At the same time, the story acknowledges a darker truth. The system cannot be repaired. The transformation of threads into thorns may not be reversible, and a future collapse may come quietly rather than violently. This suggests that the world Raphael and MC inhabit is already unstable, a late-stage version of a system that has been repeating and degrading over time. Within this context, MC's role becomes even more significant. She is not just a connection within the system, but potentially an exception to it, something that exists outside its usual rules. This is why her presence feels different and why she has such a profound effect on Raphael. Ultimately, Fairy Tail reveals that the purpose of existence is not permanence, but meaning. The Dreamweavers continue their work not to save the world, but to ensure that it is remembered, just like Raphael.